a little bit about where we are today in terms of the technology, because often we're moving so fast. We're kind of, in computing technology, we had Moore's law, which said something about every 18 months the price of chips would halve. We have Swainson's law, which says that literally the same applies, where you will be able to buy double the power of solar panel for the same price in I think it's a 3-year period. So it's very, very similar to the IT industry and the computing industry, where the technology is moving fast, which begs the question, and I think it's something we all do when we say, well, should I buy this new laptop today, or is there going to be something faster, better, bigger tomorrow, and I don't want to be replacing it in a year's time. Unfortunately, you have to draw a line in the sand somewhere and say, okay, this is where I'm going to make my move, but I want to have an upgrade path. I want to have something that's scalable. I don't want to lose my investment or any portion of my investment. I would like to make a sensible decision for me today. And what's sensible for you may not suit me, and we all have unique requirements. So this is a simple backup system, so it has no solar capability at all. Right now I am having an energy audit done on this house, which I moved into recently, to actually measure the demand of electricity so that we can populate the roof with adequate solar. So what will happen then is this will be replaced, and this is obviously, as I said, a fairly old device, but it will be replaced by a much more modern inverter, and not just a backup inverter. It will be called a hybrid inverter, and that implies that it does solar as well as the backup function. So there will literally be another channel going up to the roof, which will be drawing in power from the solar. So we'll be getting power from two sources, from the grid and from the solar, which will come through and charge the batteries and feed through to the DB board. If you look at international research, today we have about 200 gigawatts, and we're talking about in the low end market, so not the high end utility scale. We have about 200 gigawatts of solar deployed without batteries. That's now 2020. By 2040 we'll have about 550 gigawatts of solar without batteries deployed. Today we also have 200 gigawatts of solar deployed with batteries. In other words, a system that is hybrid by nature. But by 2040 we'll have 1,250 gigawatts of power deployed with batteries. So you can see very much the trend is, it's not going to be you do one or the other, you do both. So really the smart thing to do today is to say, I'm going to start with a hybrid system today. Whether I want to just do backup for now, because we have load shedding and power outages, or I just want to do solar because electricity is becoming so expensive, I'd like to get the solar deployed, and then later, when I have the budget for it, I'll apply the batteries. So we tend to try and advise people to look towards that. There are people who say, I will never add solar, and that's fine for whatever their reasons may be. Or, you know what, I don't really need the backup part, I want to make the savings. This is a pure cost exercise for me, reducing my costs. If the power goes off, the power goes off. And please remember, a lot of people think that if you have solar on the roof and you have a simple grid-tied system, in other words, no batteries, just an inverter that is tied to the grid, what it does is it takes the frequency in hertz from the grid, and that's its reference frequency to operate, and then it feeds through electricity into your DB board. If the grid goes down, although you have solar on your roof, you do not have any power. So a lot of people think if I've got solar on my roof and it's daytime, I'm going to have power. Not true, not with a grid tie inverter. So you do need that hybrid functionality. or you need a completely off-grid system that doesn't tie to the grid to do that sort of thing, which means you need the batteries. The technology is advancing. They're starting to incorporate storage into solar panels, and there's some really gee whiz stuff happening out there, but it's going to be many, many years before we see it. They're talking about algae-based panels that photosynthesize and create energy and store the energy. They're talking about using shells from shrimps or prawns to make electrodes in batteries, in these vanadium redox batteries. So there's some really, really exciting stuff happening, but it's, you know, it's 10, 15 years away from now. But I think that's the really neat part about the energy industry. It's starting to become extremely sustainable, using a lot of natural stuff in the compilation of products. So whilst we use a lot of, you know, people will say, well, solar energy is clean. It's not 100% clean. There's a lot of chemicals get used in a solar panel, and we use lead for the soldering in the junctions. So it's not as clean as, you know, people think that solar is absolutely 100% clean. It's not. In its production, it's not as clean as we would like it to be, and I think we'll move towards that. So the hybrid system has the intelligence, and we can program it to say, we've got power coming in from the grid, we've got power coming in from the solar. We want you to focus from the solar channel on charging the batteries first. Then what we want you to do, once the batteries are completely full, is we want to feed back that energy into the grid. Now you can do this in Johannesburg, Cape Town, many of the major cities today. You can feed back that energy. You can't just do it, you have to actually apply to do it, and you get a credit for the energy that you feed back. So the intelligence in the system allows you to either store the energy or get a credit for the energy, and then to feed energy through to your actual household. So if you're, and this is about a behavioral thing. When you have solar, typically your solar will come online about 9 o'clock in the morning. And people say, oh, we must have about 8-9 hours of sun. We don't. The average in Johannesburg is 6.2 hours because of the angles. So you have to change your behavior to actually optimize what you do in the house at what time when you have solar. So running washing machines is a great idea, you know, after 9 o'clock and so on and so forth. Solar geysers are another great idea, or gas geyser even, because geysers are they use about a third of your power in your house. So it's a great way of reducing your bill. They're not inexpensive, and gas certainly costs money. Solar doesn't, and some of the solar geysers out there are really, really very, very good. So yeah, I think that from a hybrid perspective, it's a great way to go, because you have that scalability, and you can achieve whatever objective you want at that particular moment in time. And then in future, as things grow and scale, it's very easy to change out technologies. So in terms of scalability of your system, if you have your inverter and it's a hybrid inverter, you may elect to move to lithium-ion, at a later stage. The cabinet, as it is below here, has got 8 lead-acid batteries in it, but it has the cables and the links, and it's wired into the inverter. So some people might say, well, I want to retain that. I don't necessarily want to change that form factor, and I want to retain the classic battery style. So we have a lithium-ion battery that looks exactly like this. It's a bit of overkill in terms of the space it requires. So inside it's obviously not full, but to fit into the cabinet, we get them manufactured in that size. But it's lithium, it has battery management system on board, and it simply plugs straight into the cabinet. Alternatively, there's a rack mount system that you can have that mounts on the wall, or there's individual batteries that look very similar to this that are mounted to the wall. So there's many form factors that you can get the lithium-ion batteries in. We also do other kinds of batteries. So for larger installations, we have nanocarbon batteries, which are essentially lead batteries, but they use a nanocarbon paste on the anode of the battery to slow down the sulfation, which is the biggest enemy in lead acid batteries. They are fairly large individual cells, 2-volt cells, but have very similar performance, so 5,000 cycles to lithium-ion, but are half the price of lithium-ion. So that's for a largish system. That's the way we would go. So they typically come in 50 kilowatt hour blocks. We now have a smaller one which is 25 kilowatt hours. So for a larger house, or for a building, or a large installation in some kind of a complex, it's a very inexpensive way of creating energy. So I trust that has given you a bit more insight as to what the options are in terms of how you provide backup power, how you can migrate to having solar as well. I think the corporates certainly should be looking at providing their people with backup power. I know obviously they provide them with the computing power, they expect them to work from home, but if we're going to see the kind of load shedding we're talking about, and I don't think it's something that's going to go away anytime soon. And what we see is, we see a flurry of, when load shedding comes along, we see a flurry of business, and then as soon as it stops, it drops right off. And even quotes that we put out, when people kind of forget about it, because it's a grudge purchase. It's an insurance. But the problem is, so we see spikes in our business. The problem is when it comes back, everybody's queuing up and they want their systems installed. They want them installed today because they've got to work. So I really urge you to think about it in a long-term, with a long-term view, and think about doing something kind of soon. Even if it's a small start, get yourself some kind of backup that suits your application. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope it's been informative.